Welcome back to another episode of Pain Points, where the world meets business for busy entrepreneurs, where we jump into many things: entrepreneurship, brand, marketing, sales, culture. And I prematurely paused the music. That was a terrible fade out for today's episode. But we'll get better, we promise. One half of the team here, Darius Bell, along with Samson Jagoris. Welcome back.
Good morning. Yeah, it's a pretty pivotal week in our American history as we head into our elections here in a couple days.
Yeah, dude, this is you can sense the pivotal nature of this election. On many, regardless of where you're landing and where you could go, there is a real sense of this is significant. I've had people try to downplay it around me, like this would just be another election. Like I'm like, nah, something's significant about this one, and I don't know why, but you can tell.
Yeah, I think it's where we're at as an economy, America economy, globally, where we're at, societally, where we're at. The only thing that would probably feel significant to this would be, circa 1940s, right? World War II.
Yeah.
I mean, we're at the outsets of it, right? So, it's not like there's not some crazy war happening in the world right now. We're just not really participating yet. You know?
Yeah, and I know why I believe it's so significant. But you just look at it and you're like, this is determining the direction that our country is going to go, not for just 4 years.
Yes.
You can see it's beyond 4 years. This is, where are they going to have a actually, you know what? I'm gonna skip that today. I'm gonna skip that. And let's just jump right into something. Let's just jump right into some entrepreneurs, some market news here.
So this is relevant. Like we've been starting off every single week, just talking about what's happening economically, both stateside and globally. I think the top of mind topic for everybody is what's happening with the Fed, because we basically have a Fed funds meeting coming up this week. At the same time, we have an election coming up this week. And so I was reading an article on MarketWatch this morning. And basically, it's the title is "The Fed Seen Agreeing to a Quarter Point Rate Cut." So that means they're going to cut another 25 basis points. They already cut a half a point or 50 basis points off in the last month. And so while disputes flare about the road ahead, that's basically what it says. Fed seen agreeing to quarter point rate cut while disputes flare about the road ahead. And it's pretty significant because typically a 50 basis point cut is considered aggressive. We saw that after they cut rates, they climbed back up above the 50 basis point cut and on the 10-year treasury, and now they're getting ready to cut it again. And I think all of this action is being clouded by the fact that we're unsure who is going to be winning this election. But typically what happens when the stock market goes up, the bonds go down. When bonds go down, rates go up, right? And that's what's been happening. I've seen some people talking about this is what we would call, from the trading standpoint, a melt up, which is basically like a blow off top where the market just screams higher and then has a cataclysmic fall from grace. So you have all these competing things going back and forth with the Federal Reserve under the Keynesian economics trying to cut rates and control it. You have the larger picture, which is who's going to win this election, and everything that's happening in the global economy, basically muddying this up. So I don't think we'll get any kind of clarity or relief until the election is complete. We actually know who's won. And that'll be basically determining which way it goes. But what's interesting, at the same time, it just popped up on MarketWatch. There's this live ticker, MarketWatch Live, where it says the 10 and 30-year bond yields dive from 4-month highs after Iowa poll tilts in favor of Kamala Harris. And so, basically bonds down, bond yields up, right? Bonds down. And so, again, these are the competing things that we're trying to play out over the next week, maybe even two.
So when you're looking at that, where's your head going? taking in those inputs?
It all just dictates ultimately inflation, right? And the cost of capital. We've talked about it on here. It's pretty hard to get ahead without using some form of leverage.
Hmm.
And so if it gets too expensive to get leverage, then you're going to see less of that, which might long term be good for the economy, but going to make it really challenging, right? Because you're going to need a lot of cash in order to move and grow your business, which can be pretty challenging in a inflationary environment, right?
Right. If it almost feels like we're heading towards a pumping the brakes kind of environment where it's like pump the brakes, take a step back, let the engines cool a bit, and then
Yeah.
reassess.
Yeah. And this is not abnormal for an election. Then you also have, fourth quarter, end of the year. There was a really bad jobs report that came out last week as well.
Yeah, that was terrible, actually.
Yeah. So, I don't know how it changes every single month, right? Like, oh, it's great, it's bad, it's great, it's bad. It's like up or down. I think, you just got to use a little bit of logic and stop listening to the media of like, it's not great.
Well,
Right.
dude, I had 3 people reach out to me about the jobs report that never reach out about that kind of stuff. And it was
Interesting.
this yeah, and it was this realization, and it was just very few minute conversations, one through text, and it was like these realizations of like, this is I'm being lied to. Like, this is 3 people that they're not conservatives, like,
Yeah.
but I'm being lied to. Like, and, just leave the conversation there and go into like, yeah, the whole machine. No, but just, yeah, you are. Talk to
Yeah.
you soon. Talk to you in a couple weeks after the election.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, this is what we were talking about previously, right? Like the whole Keynesian versus Austrian economics topic. The media is one of the tools that Keynesians use to try to clear up the fear, uncertainty, and doubt to try to land the plane softly, right? So, yeah, you're getting none of the truth. You have to just use some discernment and wisdom to say, it's hard right now.
mm,
Business is hard. Things are more expensive than they have ever been. They're talking about increasing taxes, right? Inflation is a tax, and whether they want to call that or not, but it is a tax on future generations. It's a tax on the money that they're printing, is a tax on the future value of the dollar. Jobs are hard to come by. Layoffs are happening like crazy. I mean, we can't keep going this route and expecting a different result.
right.
So
Insanity.
logic says we should probably just do the exact opposite. Maybe just go with a different camp, different theory. But most people are not. They're becoming more educated, but they're not as educated as we are on the topic because we talk about it constantly, right? We're constantly looking for the cracks in the argument.
Dude, so I actually think that's a huge opportunity for either for a business or a community engagement space opportunity where it's like these conversations that aren't normally happening, how can we start facilitating them in our community, not in any sort of political sense, but like we can see the conversations aren't happening,
Mhm.
so let's just start facilitating them, making events out of them, games out of them. uh,
Yep.
I think there's a great opportunity for some savvy entrepreneurs to come in and be like, we're going to change the landscape, the battle of ideas or something like that.
Yeah, or just a couple of guys on a podcast every Monday came up and just talk. So kind of piggybacking off of that, right? So I told you that when I learned to trade commodities, stocks,
Hmm.
I learned it from the technical standpoint how to trade. But what I learned over the years is that the fundamentals are typically baked into the chart itself. And so if you can get congruency or alignment between those two things, that's when you're generally onto something. So Bravos Research, who we brought up here quite a few times, killer
Yeah.
thread. I'm going to go ahead and say that he ripped this one from me because I was the one that talked about inflation adjusted returns on the S&P before he brought it up. But the thread goes like this. It says the market is up, and then we're talking about the S&P 500. The market is up over 80,000% since 1918,
Wow.
but only up 5,000% when adjusted for inflation. You can't make this up. So basically, it's saying that it's over inflated at the moment.
Hmm.
So the second thread, part of the thread says the stock market has surged 40% over the last 12 months, reaching all-time highs, similar to what we saw during the late 1920s. Both periods showed unsustainable uptrends, which raises concerns about the current rally's sustainability.
Mm.
Looking at inflation-adjusted S&P 500, it's clearly overextended, much like it was before the fourth largest crash in the past 110 years.
Wow.
But to get a complete picture, we need to compare it to the non-inflation adjusted S&P 500. Since 1921, the S&P has gained over 65,000%, meaning $1,000 invested back then would be now worth $650,000. If only I were alive back then and I had $1,000.
You'd be 103 years old, unable to do anything with it.
When adjusted for inflation, though the market's return shrinks to 5,000%, inflation's impact on long-term stock returns is massive, especially when viewed over a long-term horizon. This is the context behind the idea that stocks only go up in the long run. Scrolling down, however, even with this long-term uptrend, there are painful periods. If you invested $1,000 in March 2000, it would have been worth only $500 a decade later. The same is true if you invested in August 1929. By the end of the following decade, your investment would have been halved. This is where the inflation-adjusted chart helps. While the S&P 500 rises over time, it also shows significant declines relative to inflation. Historically, the inflation-adjusted S&P 500 has moved within a relatively stable range. When the S&P hit the top of this range, it marked extremely poor time to invest. This happened in 1913, 1929, 1965, 1999. Hit that show more button.
Yep.
In each of these cases, the market eventually fell with at least a 60% drop in inflation-adjusted value. So this is where
we are right here.
Well, yeah, but they'll try to tell you, like, financial planners will try to tell you, like, oh, well, you can't time the market. It's like, true, but I can also see when it's extremely outside the mean, and that's the worst actually dollar cost average in, because I'm going to get wrecked. I put 1,000 in and it's worth 400.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or I could wait for some sort of significant 30, 50, 60% sell-off to start that dollar cost averaging. And as I reach the extreme, I put less and less into the market, right? And then I adjust. So theoretically, if you were just patient and you looked at the market taking a 30 or 60% decline, and then I started investing, I can make up a huge bit of ground, right?
Right.
And so his history doesn't repeat itself, but it tends to rhyme. And I think that if you look at the chart, historically speaking, we're way outside the mean. So it says most agree that the stock market is overextended on an inflation-adjusted basis, but what does that mean for the actual non-adjusted S&P 500? These are the types of insights we regularly cover in our investment strategy videos. Scroll down. Shameless plug. It says just because inflation-adjusted returns doesn't mean the S&P 500 itself has to fall, particularly if inflation runs out of control. So it's saying that inflation could catch up, right? Or the market could adjust back to the mean, which I think is probably a higher probability given that it's up 80,000% compared to 5,000%. So take Turkey as an example when they're talking about the country, I believe, not Turkey, the food. Its stock market adjusted for inflation has gone virtually nowhere over the last 20 years, offering a 0% return since 2006, an effect of hyperinflation eroding gains. In contrast, Turkey's nominal stock market has soared over 2,000% in the same time period. This gap illustrates how high inflation can artificially inflate stock prices without actually improving real returns. Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh, well, look, I'm up 65,000%, but it's like on a net gain basis, you're not. Some believe this is happening in the U.S. today. Investors may be anticipating a major wave of inflation, perhaps even hyperinflation, which could explain the aggressive stock market melt up. But can we really expect hyperinflation melt up now? Looking at U.S. inflation, it's currently around 2.5%. For hyperinflation to drive the market higher, inflation would need to be much higher, which he's showing the chart there, which if you're listening, you can't see, but compared to its peak at like 9% in 22, it's much lower. So for comparison, Turkey's inflation rate is around 50%, about 20 times higher than the U.S. rate. So the argument for hyperinflation-induced U.S. market melt-up doesn't seem realistic. Additionally, when the U.S. inflation spikes, the stock market tends to decline. Higher inflation leads to higher interest rates, which usually push stock prices lower.
Wow.
Right now, they're trying to cut rates, so you can see that dichotomy playing out. For example, in the 1970s, despite high inflation, the market saw multiple 30 and 50% declines. This is much more realistic scenario if inflation were to rise again today. But for now, U.S. inflation is cooling. Key commodities like wheat, chicken, oil, and natural gas have all dropped, which reduces the risk of major inflationary surge. If inflation remains low, stocks could continue to melt up, resembling periods in the late 1990s, 1980s, and late 1920s, times of low and stable inflation. Each of these melt-ups eventually end in a crash, and we could be on a similar path this time as well.
Yeah. So there we go. That was a thorough thread from Bravos.
Yeah, and piggybacks off of what we were talking about to open up the podcast. He's just looking at it from the stock market, including the stock market trends analysis and charts analysis, to give you like a greater perspective, because I don't think it sinks in as much when you can't see the disparity between like 5,000% inflation and 80,000% increase, and how far away that is from the mean. Mm-hmm. And then also just the deterioration in the value of capital, right? We talk about cash should be an asset, but it's not, right?
Yeah, whenever we cover that, me and I always ask this question of just like, okay, so yeah, has our advice to our listeners changed at all from what we've been saying in terms of coming across threads like that? No, it hasn't.
It hasn't. Yeah, you got to keep playing the game. You got to keep pushing forward. You got to keep navigating the economy, but you do need to be aware, right, that the market is changing around you, and the cost of capital is going to become more expensive if they keep raising rates or the market takes over. Mm-hmm. If the market, there's a saying that says, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. The market always needs another sucker. We just don't want that to be us, right? So now's not the time to be getting FOMO over the stock market. Now's not the time to be getting, I think, uber aggressive with any kind of investing or even expansion. But it is a time to be very tactical, very meticulous, auditing your operating expense, auditing your marketing, doing everything you can to drive the most bottom line dollar with the least amount of money.
Yeah, the way I've been summing it up is it's a time for wisdom and preparation.
Right.
Wisdom and wisdom in the sense of being reserved, not speedily trying to make a wise choice, but the reservation that allows you to actually analyze and meanwhile prepares also.
Yep. So piggybacking off of that, and then we can get off this economic topic, but Bravos came out with one other thread talking specifically about the U.S. Treasury bond market. And so basically it starts off with, great hook, U.S. government debt market has collapsed or has started to collapse. This has massive implications for the economy, a thread. And it says U.S. government bonds have broken below a 40-year uptrend after experiencing one of the most painful bear markets since the 1980s. Treasury bonds, typically 40% of an investor's portfolio, have led to big losses because of their sharp decline. Since March 2020, gold has outperformed bonds by 100% amid surging government spending. Government spending has risen from $3.4 trillion to almost $4 trillion in just 2 years. And that chart right there is actually pretty telling. The gold versus treasury bonds. Mm-hmm. Constantly rising government spending financed by issuing more treasury bonds is a major problem. This has caused bond prices to drop significantly. 2024 treasury bond issuance is expected to hit 1.9 trillion. This level is higher than even the peak of the 2008 financial crisis, which is very important to pay attention to. Our long-term bond outlook is bearish, but with ongoing rate cuts, bonds could bounce. A key factor that's driving the long-term breakdown in bonds is the decline in labor force participation rate. Since 1999, this metric has shown a strong negative correlation to U.S. government debt. So basically, less people are just actually wanting to work or actually working. Could be obviously due to a lack of jobs, but also maybe due to a lack of actually jobs that pay a reasonable wage.
So labor goes down, bonds go up.
That's what this chart is saying. Yep.
Yeah.
Number 9, decreasing labor force participation plus increasing government debt indicates economic strain. This is due to an increasing number of retirees and a shrinking workforce. The combination has compelled the government to increase its spending. I've actually heard some people say that's why they're pushing so many immigrants into the market and trying to get them work visas, which is very interesting. Number 10, it says, with the U.S. population aging and more people retiring, labor force participation is likely to decline further. This would increase government debt unless spending changes. So part of that is, right, less people working means less tax dollars, right? Means not that they could even come close to overcoming the amount of spending with taxing unless they raise it significantly, like 70, 80% tax.
Right, but that's interesting though, because you also have other factors, whether that be unemployment, whether that be other forms of benefit collection. Like it's like a broken machine.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing that's been fueling it, right, is gone, and now you have more people taking from the system via unemployment than actually contributing to it from tax standpoint.
Right.
So number 11, it says that's why gold has seen lots of bullishness lately, surging 50% since October 2023. Keep scrolling down. I think that's it. Yep, that's it for the thread.
Wow.
Yeah, so all that to say is we're in flux. Yes, the dollar is weakening, but it's also setting up some massive opportunity. So, typically you wouldn't want to be sitting just in cash because it's inflating away. But I think, me personally, I think we're getting close to some sort of correction that would allow that inflation adjusted number to kind of come back to the mean, which means your dollar actually gains some value as the market corrects.
You get a real picture,
yeah, and then you can redeploy.
I guess one of my questions, not understanding bonds entirely, is why the appeal of bonds? Is it the fact that it's tied to the U.S. government for securitization of it?
Correct. Yeah, it's government backed, so that's supposed to make it risk free. Granted, they're not just entirely inflating away the dollar, but it's versus like if I gave you a loan, right?
Right.
It's riskier because it's private and it's not government backed. But that's under the context that the government can just continually.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, wait a minute, you are the securitization for the government. So it's like,
it relies heavily on people continually playing the game.
Yeah.
And so if they opt out,
or they're forced out.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, dude. So these are all points that at which, like, I know, we never really sound the alarm on our pod, but I do think there is some degree of like somebody's ringing that bell. It's like, dude, this is not. It's how we always say it's never as good as it seems, never as bad as it seems, but somewhere in the middle. Well, when I'm coming back to the middle, I'm like, it's bad, actually. Like,
I think it's just, Warren Buffett says it, right? Be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful.
Yeah.
And so I don't think people are fearful enough at the moment. So I'm concerned. Like we went to the mall a couple weeks ago, and I was just blown away at how many people were out there and how much money was being spent when we were there just bumming around, right? To get like a pair of jeans and have a coffee and kill the day. But people were shopping their butts off. And it's everywhere. People are still going out. The restaurants are still full. Like nobody has sounded the alarm yet. The purse strings are not being pulled back. And that makes me very concerned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hence why we got buddies going to gun stores this morning.
Yeah, not knowing how this is going to end. They're like, man, let's talk about some ammo. Might get crazy.
All right. So heading into the sort of entrepreneurship, moving away from economics, I pulled two things I wanted to share this morning. One is going to be from Sam Altman, who of course is always a good listen. But the first here is going to actually be from, I never get Vusi's last name right. Tembekwayo, Vusi Tembekwayo.
Oh, you nailed it.
so he has great content online, but I was binging on his Twitter this weekend, and um, there were like several different things I wanted to bring in, but I tapered myself, and
Mhm.
I thought this was an interesting one to share with you all.
What if I told you that the reason why you want certain things so deeply is because it's already yours at some point on your timeline? When I was running MySpace, we were at about 100 million users, and we were watching the growth of Spotify happening in Europe. And Spotify was planning their entrance into the US market. I sat down for lunch with Shaq and Daniel, the CEO and COO of Spotify, and suggested that maybe we consider merging the companies or allowing us to acquire them. Daniel looked me in the eye and he said, Mike, this is what you don't understand. The 100 million MySpace users you have are actually Spotify users. They just don't know it yet. And it was just such a king statement of like, look, I've got the best product. I'm coming into your market. I'm going to take your audience. I'm going to bring them onto my platform because they are my users. They just don't know it yet. So this quote of saying, what if I told you that the reason you want certain things so deeply is because it's already yours, is an interesting vision as it relates to a CEO, where you actually feel the future and you're just working towards that point in time.
Oh, that's
Good, right?
cold-blooded, by the way.
Yeah, what a statement,
Uh,
right? There's
yeah,
a
that
lot of
is.
layers to that. Competition, there's the actual belief set, faith.
Yeah. Yeah, basically, this is a similar journey to what we're on, right? It's like the there's a call for a better product, but nobody actually understands entirely what it looks like, but they know what it would feel like.
Mhm,
And that's what we're pursuing, right?
mhm.
And we did get an offer, right, to of another company to buy our business, to which we said, why would I
Wow.
give up that early, right?
Right,
And
right.
that's the for that number. Why would I give up that early for that number, right? Because theoretically we can just keep chipping away, um, and that's definitely what Spotify did. And look at them now, man. They're Goliath.
Yeah, and then in the statement of they're already users of ours, they just don't know it yet. I'm like, wow.
That's fire.
But that's when you see you see the market for what it really is.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
I thought that was like, oh, let's go. And he's Vusi wasn't the original poster. I just happened to come across it again on his when I was binging on some Vusi. All
Yeah.
right, next up is Sam Altman. So Sam Altman, everyone knows who Sam Altman is, and there's a plethora of Sam Altman advice out there, and I had some collected this morning, but I researched it because I was like, the way the presentation was kind of iffy, and then I found numerous copies of the same one, and so I pulled this in, but this is Sam Altman's startup advice, or it's a list of startup advice, and it's multiple different ideas. But I want to survey some of these with you and our listeners here. Yeah. So look, so he says, number one, this is number one: make something people want. Like talk about a no brainer. But do you know how often in what we do we can be busy doing things, but there's no actual validation that this is something that people want. You
Do you
have
think? Yeah, real quick question on that. Do you think that happens a lot in like software startups versus service-based companies? Because I feel like service is a more clear, direct line, right?
Yeah, definitely I would say software or even like consumer product goods spaces where you assume like this is the dopest idea ever, and or I'm gonna make this bag this way or this shirt or these shoes this way, or take for example the Segway, right? Um, everyone, they put a lot of money into this is gonna revolutionize it, but it wasn't that people wanted to get around like that. Like people didn't care, right? So
Yeah, I think that the wisdom there, make something that people want, is make sure your product isn't just solving a part of a bigger problem. Does that make
yeah,
sense? It's like, so
yeah,
for example, like I'm going to go innovate the way that lug nuts are made on wheels. It's like that's a part of a grander problem, right? The lug nut isn't as important as the wheel itself, for
mhm,
example.
mhm.
And
Yeah,
so that's where I see it happen. I mean, we've seen it a lot in our space. people don't understand the full component of the problem. They see like a portion, and then they see like how you could use tech to solve a portion, and then they go try to solve that. And it's like, well, that doesn't solve the complete problem. So it's not enough for me to say change what I'm doing in order to adopt that new thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, to this point of make something people want, I think in order to do that, I think you also there's a degree of listening and humility that I think really affords you clarity or clear judgment into even beginning to assess what people want. To even be able to watch people, like you don't have to talk people to people. You can just watch them and see what is it that they want. We know ultimately what people want, right? More time, more money, greater health, stronger relationships. You know, like there's those things. Pain alleviation. But when you're talking about distilling it, I think you have to have a disposition of curiosity and observation and being willing to like really get in there and before you start, just to actually consider the other person deeply.
Yeah.
Um, or it just so happens that you're passionate about it, so you have that insight because you are one of those people. So, uh,
Yeah. So like that's why you even hear Altman say the person who's solving their own problem tends to be the best creator of the product.
mhm, mhm. Now look at some of these other ones. So, it says number 2, a great team and a great market are both critically important. You have to have both. We know that already, but that's emboldened. There's several of these. So number 4, set a clear, easy to understand vision for your company and make it be a mission people believe in. Uh, that one, I think, takes a lot of energy on the founders, and therefore it's something that is harder to do or harder to endure because over time you might get tired, right? You might get tired of steady pointing that direction, but in order to get to get somewhere you almost have to keep doing that, and we know that as fathers and husbands and
Yeah.
is there.
To add to that, this is where you see the opposite problem of make something people want.
Mhm,
When you're building kind of software as a startup kind of stuff, it's really easy to like missional vision. Here's where we're going. This is what we're building. This is where we're going. This is what we're doing. It's harder when it's like something that people use every day,
mhm,
like plumbing company.
right.
We're going to change the way that plumbing is done. Nah, I'm not really buying that. Right.
Yeah.
Um, so how do you create a mission or a vision around something like that that is, pretty much a daily, pretty commonly known and accepted service
Mhm,
that people need? And people will say, well, I don't really like to look 10 years down the road because that seems too far. It's like, well, then why are you doing it? Because if you don't have a clear vision for where you're going, it's going to be really hard to get people to buy into that and stick around long
mhm,
things.
mhm. Facts. So there's like 89 of these different things, but
95. I looked. It's 95.
there's a lot of them. This one, number 12 here, obsess about the quality of the product. I'm just going to go through and just some of the ones that have stood out to me just reading these. So, obsess over the quality of the product. Number 21, eliminate distractions. Um, be frugal, right?
22. Don't die.
Don't die, right?
Meaning, like,
Don't die.
don't let your business fizzle out because you run out of money or runway or whatever it might be.
Yeah, look at 24. You'll often hear conflicting advice about everything but build a great product. This means you can go either way on much of the rest of it, and it doesn't really matter. Just make a decision and get back to work. Product market fit is what matters. You can and will make a lot of mistakes.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
And that's a great point. Like we've talked about it, but I think Airbnb, it took them 3 years to find product market fit.
Yeah. Yeah. Then here on the next slide over here, boom. So look at this. It's standard for founders to keep board control in the first round. Listen to everyone, then make your own decision. That's key, right? That number 35 in particular. 36. Remember that you're more likely to die because you execute badly than get crushed by a competitor,
Hmm.
i.e., get your eyes off your competition and onto your team and what you guys are doing.
Yep.
Number 38, have a direct relationship with your customers. Uh, Number 39, be formidable. Do not be easy to push around. 43, obviously, that's in bold for a reason. Simple is good. Be suspicious of complexity. That
Yep.
one right there in our world and just in the world of entrepreneurship as a whole, people are very simple when it boils down to it. There might be complexity in how we're physically made and created, but we are very simple.
Good example of that. So in the gym business, we rolled out a new product. And so the salesperson was out there beta testing like
Mhm.
some new pitch and strategy. And so he's trying to explain it to me how he's pricing these things. And I'm
Mhm.
going, dude, I own the business. I know what you're talking about. And I'm confused. And he goes, good point. It's just like, we got to make it simpler than that.
Yes. Number 50, I'll close out here with number 50 here. You can create value with breakthrough innovation. Everyone, prioritizes that. Incremental refinement or complex coordination. Great companies often do two of these. The very best companies do all three.
Mm, that's really good. Can you scroll down? I think there's a couple more bold ones on here.
So this is the last one. Be suspicious of any work that is not building product or getting customers. Let's go. It's easy to get sucked into an infrastructure rewrite death spiral.
Yeah, constantly trying to, we need to reorg the way that we built our database or something.
Yeah. Surf someone else's wave is another bold one.
Mm.
Keep burn low until you're sure everything is working. That one's key. 95, the best startups are defined by exceptions, sorry. All these rules are probably breakable, but probably not all at the same time.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why there's like, people say a lot of like matter of fact statements.
Mhm.
Oh, you have to. And I just don't know if that's necessarily true, especially as the market's always changing, marketing's always changing, technology's always changing. So
Yeah.
great
And
wisdom.
great wisdom. And I think, part of why I pulled it in is just because, you know, where I am at on my journey as an entrepreneur, you just realize the these these successful entrepreneurs are leaving clues, they are making statements, they are putting what you need to know out there. It's just taking the time to engage with it, to process it, to decipher it, and make decisions, accordingly, especially if it's someone who's doing what you're setting out to do, who's done it.
Yeah, and I think the one that gets overlooked the most is just how much endurance it actually takes.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, there was one bullet there where
Everybody,
he says 10 years.
yeah,
Mm.
everybody gets hyped up or maybe feels insufficient when they see some guy who went from 0 to 1 million in ARR in 6 months.
Yeah.
It's like, cool. That's an exception. That's not a rule, though. And if every business operated that way or it was quote unquote that easy, then business wouldn't. Everybody would be successful in business.
Mhm.
It just depends on what you're doing, what you're building, so on and so forth.
Yeah. Well, so okay, so the next two I have here are two threads on marketing. I'm going to pivot a bit because the one with Rory Sutherland it has like 5 or 6 videos in it, and I just don't want it to get too long in nature. But there are some great tidbits that we can gather just from reading the thread versus watching some of the videos. And so I'll jump into that here. This comes from Marketing Max on X. And he says, one of the greatest minds you've never heard of, Rory Sutherland. Actually, I have heard of him. You've heard of him. So many people have heard of him, but I get the hook. He's behind the most viral ad campaigns in the world. Coca-Cola, Microsoft, and Facebook use his 5 behavioral insights to capture your attention. Here's how you can leverage his strategies in your marketing. Uh, so Rory is big on context. Context is everything. Rory says our choices are heavily influenced by the environment. Example given: a $5 beer seems expensive at the grocery store, but cheap at a fancy hotel. Our brains use context as a shortcut for decision making. So he says how to use this. Frame your product in the right context. So as we're trying to position our products and our services, we have to remember the context in which the consumer is engaging with said product or service. So you can highlight unique features that stand out, create scarcity to increase perceived value. It's not just what you offer, but how you present it. This in turn bleeds into the power of reframing, in which Roy Sutherland describes changing how you describe something can radically alter its perception. Example given would be 40% fat yogurt sounds unhealthy, 60% fat free sounds great. Same product, different frame. How you can apply this? You can emphasize benefits instead of focusing on features, turn negatives into positives, and use language that resonates with your audience. Because you're not lying, you're just presenting the truth from a different angle.
100%. Yeah, it's always, the statement is always compared to what? That
Mhm.
seems expensive. Compared to what? Losing your leg? That seems pretty cheap, compared
Yeah.
to what? going out to eat, which will cost you $100. Like, this is $100 a month. What are we talking about?
Number 3, the importance of signaling. Sutherland argues that seemingly irrational behaviors often serve as powerful signals. Example given: expensive watches. They're not about telling time, but signaling status and success. So how do you leverage? How do we leverage the importance of signaling? Well, we identify what our product signals about the user. You create packaging that sends the right message, and use influencers who embody your brand's values. Remember, people buy identities, not just products. They also buy mission. They also buy purpose. They also buy the things that really matter to them. So, the magic of small details. Number 4, he believes tiny, unexpected touches can have outsized impacts. Examples: hotels putting chocolate on your pillow. It costs pennies, but significantly boosts satisfaction. That's a no-brainer there. We've all seen that, or a handwritten note, or something in the mail that you didn't expect, or a phone call from someone in the company that you didn't anticipate. Number 5, the counterintuitive approach. Sutherland loves solving problems by doing the opposite of what seems logical. An example given would be London Underground reduced delays by removing stand on the right signs on escalators. Counterintuitive, but effective. Probably need to watch the video to really gather that one. But the whole point being is it's okay to question industry norms. It's okay to try the opposite of what competitors are doing, and you can look for unconventional solutions to common problems. Sometimes the best way forward is actually backwards. So, yeah, decent thread there. If you haven't listened to any of Rory Sutherland, he's got some great videos online, and he actually is quite the knowledgeable guy when you listen to him.
Why do you think that most people's idea of like marketing is to like discount? I see it so often, right? Of like, oh, we got to have this special offer, and I'm like about the anti-offer, like we don't discount our price, right? Like, they're all cars. Some of them are Kias and some of them are Porsches. You just got to decide what kind you want to drive. If you're a Kia kind of guy, like, this ain't it.
Yeah, I think most, if I had to wager anything, I think it's because we prioritize the actual sell or the transaction. It's a overindulgence into, I need to secure that, so I'm going to go to whatever means I need to do to secure that person buys. But I think it ignores why people buy.
Yeah, I agree. I think most infant entrepreneurs or marketers assume that price and value are congruent topics, but in the absence of value, everything feels expensive, right? So I think that's what he's getting through in that post is value creation. Then price becomes irrelevant.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and there's just so many things that matter more than price to people. And part of I don't know whether it's the intersection of like mass media and times in history where you be on a street corner and someone else is across the street and you're 30. What, I don't know if it's that or not, but I definitely think it's well, what am I trying to do? I need to sell this, so I got to sell this by any means possible, versus like, actually, this isn't for you, person. You probably should go over to Jerry's and get your 20% off because I'm going 20% up.
I think sometimes too, stepping outside of the box of your business and looking at alternative, like in other contexts. Like, I always use like a burger and fries as an example in my head of like, okay, paying $22, $23 for a burger and fries at McDonald's, is that worth it? No. Why not? Because I'm there to get something that like tastes good fast, not necessarily there for the experience. But sitting down at your local tavern and getting like a premium burger and fries in this cool environment is worth $23, right? Why is that? What's the difference, right? It's because you're valuing the time, the experience, the conversation that you get. You're not just there for
quick
food.
fix. Yeah.
Quick fix. Yeah.
Well, and unless you live in California where it's fast and quick fix, but you're still paying $23. So, all right. Okay, so we have two more here. I'm debating on the Spotify one. I wanted to get into it, but both of these threads were pretty long in nature.
Pick your favorite.
Well, the next, so it's between Spotify and Kamala Harris. So I kind of want to go into the Kamala one just here as we close out with election day tomorrow.
Your call.
And all right, I'm gonna do Kamala. So there was an ad that came out over the weekend, and so Kamala, let me get her name right. Out of respect, before we get a comment that says you're not saying her name right. Kamala.
Hopefully soon to be forgotten.
Kamala Harris. So they put out an ad, and in particular, they've been really pushing her within the black church, the quote unquote black church.
Seen that.
And there was an ad that came out that I wanted to just look at this ad. And then I had a couple thoughts on just the irony, just from our perspective as Christian men, as we, head into this day for our nation. And so I'm going to play the ad, and then we'll go from there and just see what happens.
All right.
The faith community has always served as a beacon of hope in trying times.
And this election
is no different.
We are going to remember this moment forever.
The moment we chose joy and freedom
as a new way forward.
Some say faith and politics don't mix, but freedom and hope do. Seeing people from all different backgrounds,
races, religions, and genders
gather to show their support and enthusiasm
for Kamala Harris is church.
She exudes integrity,
dignity,
humanity,
and empathy.
And she can reach across the aisle,
any aisle, and get things done.
That's what we need in the White House. The time is now.
The time is now.
This moment, right now. Each of us are called to our own vineyard. This is Kamala's. When our sister wins, we all win.
Vote for Kamala Harris by November the 5th.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this.
Gotta love a good race baiting campaign,
brother. This is sick, dude. Like, so the reason why I pulled it, look, guys. For some of you listening who aren't Christians, let me just tell you, this is a gross utilization of the faith for communication purposes. And to be frank, there are people on Trump's side that will do similar things. It's the notion of equating. Actually, let me take a step back and just say, so for example, in this ad, it says, we're going to choose joy and freedom, or joy and freedom. And it's like, why not choose faith and truth, or truth? How about truth? How about truth and godliness, what you are supposed to adhere to? So my critiques on this are mostly from the standpoint of being a Christian. There's such gross discrepancies of what the faith actually communicates, that what we see in clips like this. And the reason why I pulled it in is because this type of stuff works when the people who say they believe something don't actually know what they believe, don't actually know what Jesus said. And it's just a bad look. And the lesson here is just that your inability to get the information and really wrestle with the facts and get out of your feelings set you up to be okey doked.
Not a surprise. You have two camps, right? You have one camp that is still pushing this idea of radical individualism, right? And then you have the other camp that's saying, hey, what's better for us as a society as a whole, right? As an economy as a whole, as the human race as a whole. And it might require some death to radical individualism, but let's stop politicking to the minority and let's start actually politicking to the majority of what's going to move us forward. What do people care about more right now? Right. I think that's the lowest on their totem pole, unless of course, they're somehow massively benefiting from this radical individualism and all the government programs and everything that we've set up. Right. So I think to me, it's a very clear line. It's clearer than it's ever been in any previous campaign of the two camps. And it's why you're seeing people move from one side to the other, right? Because they're like, this isn't better for us as a whole. This is so irrelevant in the grand scheme of things compared to the grander problems that are going on here.
Yeah. And if I could rewind anything I just said, it would be more, I would crystallize it like this. That video, excuse me, that video coupled with this woman's actions and behavior and the platform of the party are so anti against the faith that these faith leaders are supposed to be representing, where it's like they really think that little of the people who they're trying to reach, that they would do that, that they would present her and project her in that manner when nothing about her um, says anything adhering to the faith. And so that's just how little they think of the people they're trying to reach with that.
Yeah.
So that's why I pulled it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's a good, I guess, stand on your values in your marketing reminder.
Yeah.
Because you will be called to the carpet for it.
You will. And also don't discredit the person you're actually trying to reach. They're not stupid. Like, stop insulting them with your messaging. Like, this has been happening for so long, even outside of politics. It's just this, I'm going to put this in front of you and you're so dumb, you're going to buy it. You're going to, like, it's like, no, you're not. No, you're not. No, they're not at all. So anyways, that's the marketing portion. I'll probably hit the Spotify one next week. It's a good read. It talks about how they virtually spent no money, but they have received the equivalent of billions of dollars in advertising just from some strategic decisions and owning so much data. So
the network effects that they built into the platform is crazy.
Yeah. So we'll probably look at that next week. It'll still be fresh enough to look at. So
yeah, and I'm selfishly intrigued because I love what they've done.
Great, dude.
They've even hammered on. I mean, do people even talk about Apple Music anymore?
No, but people still use it though, because I have friends that use it, and I'm like, bro, why are you still using Apple Music, bro?
Some people still have pagers too.
Yeah, they're just hoping for the BlackBerry to come back around. Like, yeah. Well, that being said, next week's pod will likely be from a bunker in Western Colorado.
Until then, we'll see you on our satellite internet.
Yeah, dude.
In our bunker next week.
Happy trails, happy voting. Go do what you got to do for your family in this republic.
Yeah, amen. God bless. Peace.